A tourist splashed water on the royal guard, thinking it would be a harmless joke, but when the guard took a single step forward, the crowd fell silent, and the tourist quickly realized his mistake. Here's what happened next. The royal palace rose before the crowds that afternoon, sunlight dancing off its golden gates. Tourists from everywhere imaginable filled the plaza, their chatter and camera clicks mixing with the gentle summer breeze. But all eyes kept coming back to one figure. There he stood, the royal guard, in that iconic red tunic and towering bearskin hat, still as a statue. You couldn't help but notice how he stayed perfectly motionless, eyes fixed straight ahead, as if the bustling crowd didn't exist. Something about his quiet strength drew people in. Parents would nudge their kids into photos, little ones would wave hopefully, and the occasional tourist would try to catch his eye. But he remained unshakable, a living monument to discipline. It's interesting how people reacted to him differently. Most watched from a polite distance, caught up in the moment. But there were always a few who saw him more as entertainment than tradition. They'd mock salute or pull faces, laughing like it was all just a show put on for their amusement. The guard never flinched. His absolute stillness had a way of bringing out different sides in people. Most found it remarkable, almost mesmerizing, but for some folks, it felt like a challenge, an invitation to see if they could crack that legendary composure. It was only a matter of time before someone took that unspoken challenge too far. The lively energy of the plaza took a sharp turn as a boisterous man from the crowd stepped forward, his loud voice cutting through the harmonious hum of tourist chatter and clicking cameras. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones as he emerged from the mass of onlookers, his presence immediately commanding attention. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of confidence that came from years of being the centre of attention. His exaggerated gestures drew all eyes to him as he closed in on the royal guard, moving with the swagger of someone who had never faced serious consequences for his actions. Behind him, a group of 5 friends, all wearing matching tourist lanyards around their necks, laughed and cheered him on. Their playful shouts, tinged with the slight slur of afternoon drinks, echoed off the ancient palace walls, urging him to push his antics further. They had that particular air of tourists who viewed the whole world as their playground, every foreign custom as their entertainment. "Go on, mate," called out the tallest of his friends, a red-faced man in a football jersey. "See if he even blinks. These guys are supposed to be like statues, right?" Another friend, filming everything on his phone, chimed in with a laugh. "Make it good, Dave. This is going viral for sure." The man, Dave, emboldened by their cheers and perhaps by the contents of the pub they'd clearly visited earlier, turned toward the guard with a smirk that spoke of years of getting away with exactly this kind of behaviour. His confidence radiated in every step, as though he owned not just the plaza, but the palace itself. His casual jeans, worn at the knees and fraying at the edges, paired with a wrinkled shirt that bore the faded logo of a popular beer brand, gave him the dishevelled appearance of someone who had never needed to make an effort to fit in. The designer sunglasses perched lazily atop his close-cropped hair seemed to complete the image of someone who thought rules were mere suggestions, meant for others but never for him. "Look at this guy," Dave said, his voice pitched deliberately loud enough to draw maximum attention, the slight northern accent in his words carrying across the plaza. "Standing there all stiff, like he's got a pole up his backside. What's the point of him anyway? Tax money well spent, eh?" He stepped closer, invading the invisible bubble of respect that most tourists instinctively maintained around the guard. The guard's red tunic seemed to glow in the late afternoon sun, the brass buttons gleaming, everything about him a study in perfection and discipline. Dave waved his hand in front of the guard's face, close enough that the guard could surely feel the breeze from it, leaning in slightly as if to get a reaction. But the guard remained perfectly still, his gaze fixed straight ahead, past Dave's shoulder, his discipline as unshakable as the palace walls themselves. The guard's stoic response, or lack thereof, only seemed to amuse Dave further, fueling his determination to get a reaction. "You know," he announced to his growing audience, gesturing expansively, "I've heard these guys don't move no matter what you do. They're like robots, programmed to just stand there looking pretty in their fancy hats." He turned back to his friends, who had spread out in a loose semicircle behind him. "What do you think? Should we test it? See what it takes to make one of Her Majesty's finest crack a smile?" His friends' reaction showed the first signs of splintering confidence. They exchanged glances, their earlier bravado diminishing as they sensed the shifting mood of the crowd around them. One of them, a slightly older man wearing a business casual outfit that suggested he should know better, muttered, "Don't push it, man. They take this stuff seriously. I've heard stories." But Dave wasn't listening anymore. The crowd had grown larger now, dozens of phones raised to record whatever might happen next, and the attention seemed to intoxicate him further. He stood taller, spreading his arms wide like a ringmaster at a circus, his voice taking on a theatrical quality as he addressed the unwilling audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced dramatically, turning in a full circle to take in all the faces, "distinguished tourists and lucky locals alike, allow me to present a unique demonstration. Today, I'll show you how to make a royal guard move, a feat many have attempted, but few have achieved." The crowd's reaction was immediate and mixed. A ripple of unease spread through the gathered onlookers like a wave. Some parents instinctively pulled their children closer, whispering urgent instructions to look away, their faces tight with disapproval. A group of elderly tourists shook their heads in dismay, while others watched with poorly disguised curiosity, their phones steady and recording, hoping to capture whatever spectacle was about to unfold. A few teenage girls giggled nervously, while a group of veterans standing off to the side crossed their arms, their expressions darkening. Dave, reading the crowd's reaction as encouragement rather than the warning it was, reached into his worn backpack with theatrical slowness. He pulled out a half-empty bottle of water, holding it up like an Olympic torch. The plastic crinkled in his grip as he shook it, drops of condensation catching the sunlight. "You see this, ladies and gents?" he called out, his voice taking on the exaggerated tone of a street performer. "This is how you make a statue come to life. This is how you wake up one of these famous guards everyone comes to see." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as his intentions became clear. The atmosphere shifted palpably, tension crackling in the air like static before a storm. Several voices called out in protest. "Don't do it! Show some respect! Someone stop him!" While others exchanged horrified glances, unable to believe what they were witnessing. But their reactions only seemed to encourage Dave further, his grin growing wider, feeding off the attention like a performer getting his first taste of the spotlight. He unscrewed the cap with deliberate slowness, each turn of the plastic accompanied by the quiet clicking sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the tense atmosphere. Then, taking a deliberate step closer to the guard, he held the bottle high above his head, his intention unmistakable. "Let's see if he's really unshakable," Dave announced, his voice carrying a note of triumph as he tilted the bottle. The water caught the sunlight as it fell, creating a brief rainbow before splashing down onto the guard's pristine red tunic, darkening the wool and running in rivulets down the carefully pressed fabric. The crowd's reaction was explosive. Gasps and cries of shock echoed across the plaza. Parents whirled their children away, covering young eyes. Phones captured everything, their owners torn between documenting the outrage and intervening. Several people shouted, "Stop it!" their voices blending into a chorus of disapproval. But Dave, caught up in his moment of infamy, didn't stop. He emptied the entire bottle, ensuring that the guard's uniform was thoroughly soaked, before stepping back with a self-satisfied laugh that echoed off the palace walls. "There we go!" he exclaimed, throwing his arms out wide like a performer taking his final bow. "What do you think, folks? Did I get a reaction? Did I make history today?" He turned in a full circle, playing to his unwilling audience, seemingly oblivious to the horror on their faces. The guard, his once immaculate uniform now stained dark with water, remained completely still. His composure was unbroken, his gaze fixed forward as though nothing had happened. Water dripped from his bearskin hat onto his shoulders, but he might as well have been carved from stone. But something about his silence had changed. It was no longer just the disciplined quiet of a ceremonial guard. It had become something else, something heavier, more pregnant with meaning. The crowd grew quiet, sensing the shift. The very air seemed to grow thicker, harder to breathe. Even Dave's friends, who had been laughing and filming moments earlier, began to shift uncomfortably, some taking small steps backward, distancing themselves from what they now realized might have been a terrible mistake. Dave, either unable or unwilling to read the room, turned back to the guard with a mocking grin that didn't quite hide his growing uncertainty. "What's wrong?" he said, his voice carrying a slight tremor that betrayed his bravado. "Cat got your tongue? Or are you not allowed to talk to someone as important as me? Come on, mate, you must be allowed to at least say thank you for the refreshing drink." His words echoed in the plaza, bouncing off ancient stones that had seen centuries of similar acts of disrespect, but they didn't carry the laughter he had hoped for. The crowd wasn't amused anymore. Instead, there was an almost palpable shift in the atmosphere, a collective holding of breath, a sense that they were witnessing the moment when an invisible line had been irreversibly crossed. The guard, still silent, took one deliberate step forward. That single step forward felt like thunder in the silent plaza. The sound of the guard's polished boot meeting ancient cobblestone echoing off the palace walls with devastating finality. Though barely 6 inches of movement, it carried the weight of centuries of tradition and authority. It was subtle, yet commanding, a deliberate motion that sent a ripple of shock through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. Dave, who had been laughing just moments earlier, froze mid-gesture, his smug grin faltering and dying on his lips as the realization of what he'd done began to seep through his alcohol-induced bravado. The Royal Guard, who had stood immovable and untouchable until now, was no longer simply enduring the disrespect. His disciplined silence, which had seemed merely procedural before, now felt charged with purpose. The silence that had once emboldened Dave now pressed down like a physical weight, heavy and foreboding. The air crackled with tension, as if the very atmosphere had become electrified with unspoken authority. The crowd held their collective breath, hundreds of eyes locked on the guard's towering figure. The water still dripped from his uniform, each drop hitting the cobblestones with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the hushed plaza. Some tourists whispered urgently to one another in various languages, their voices a babble of nervous anticipation, while others clutched their phones with white-knuckled grips, recording every moment of the unfolding drama. A young boy with wide eyes tugged at his mother's sleeve, his voice carrying clearly in the tense silence. "What's he going to do, Mummy?" But she quickly hushed him, her own face a mask of fascination and apprehension. Dave attempted to recover his rapidly crumbling composure, his voice breaking through the quiet like a jarring false note in a symphony. "Oh, look!" he called out, trying to maintain his role as the plaza's entertainer, though his laugh now carried a nervous edge that betrayed his growing uncertainty. "He finally moved! What are you going to do now, huh? You can't touch me, you're not allowed. That's the whole point of you lot, isn't it? Just standing there looking pretty?" His words, though meant to sound confident and dismissive, carried an unmistakable tremor of uncertainty. Several onlookers shook their heads in disbelief at his continued defiance. The guard didn't respond, didn't speak, didn't gesture, didn't even deign to glance in Dave's direction. He simply stood there, ramrod straight despite his sodden uniform, his gaze fixed ahead with laser focus, his presence seeming to grow more towering and unyielding with each passing second. It was a silence more eloquent than any speech could have been, a silence that radiated authority and commanded respect, carrying the full weight of the institution he represented. The water staining his uniform, rather than diminishing his dignity, seemed to highlight it, each drop a testament to his unshakable discipline. The crowd's murmurs grew more intense, their attention shifting from Dave to the guard as the power dynamic in the plaza underwent a seismic shift. "He's not just standing there anymore," someone whispered in awe. "Look at his bearing. This isn't over." Others nodded in agreement, their unease growing as they watched the guard, whose otherworldly calmness now felt like the breathless moment before a lightning strike. Dave took an involuntary step backward, his earlier bravado evaporating like morning mist. His friends, who had been filming everything on their phones, lowered their devices one by one, some even slipping them guiltily into their pockets. "Come on, mate," Dave said, holding his hands up in a placating gesture that looked more like surrender. "It was just a joke, yeah? No harm done, right? Everyone's fine. We're all having a laugh." His voice trailed off as he realized no one was laughing anymore. The guard's silence remained unbroken, but something subtle changed in his bearing. With emotion so slight it might have been missed if not for the crowd's laser focus on his every movement. He turned his head exactly 1 inch to the right, just enough to signal to the palace security personnel standing at their posts nearby. The collective gasp that went through the crowd was audible. The movement was minimal, almost imperceptible, but it carried the weight of an executioner's axe falling. Even those who had been recording lowered their phones, sensing that what was about to happen shouldn't be viewed through a screen. 2 uniformed security officers materialized from the edges of the plaza like shadows taking form, their movements precise and purposeful as they cut through the crowd. Their dark uniforms and professional bearing provided a stark contrast to the ceremonial splendor of the Royal Guard, but their authority was no less real. Their mere presence caused a stir, the murmurs growing louder as they approached Dave, who now looked as though he wished the cobblestones beneath his feet would open up and swallow him whole. Wait, just a minute," Dave stammered, his face losing what remained of its colour as he held his hands out in desperate protest. "This is all a misunderstanding. It was just water, for God's sake. It was a joke. Everyone knows these things are just for tourists anyway. I didn't mean anything by it." The security officers moved with the implacable certainty of glaciers. The first officer, a tall man with greying temples and eyes that had seen every possible variation of tourist misbehaviour, spoke in a voice that was professionally calm but carried an edge of steel. "Sir, you've crossed a very serious line. Disrespecting a royal guard isn't just poor judgment. It's a criminal offence." Dave's face, already pale, turned nearly ghostly. "Disrespect? Criminal offence?" His voice cracked on the words. "Come on, that's taking it a bit far, isn't it? Everyone here saw it. It was harmless. No one got hurt. It's just a uniform. It'll dry." The second officer, younger but no less professional, shook his head with quiet authority. "You're missing the point entirely, sir. This isn't about physical harm or wet fabric. It's about respect. Respect for the guard, respect for the uniform, and respect for everything they represent. That uniform you so casually doused has been earned through centuries of service and sacrifice." Dave's eyes darted around desperately, seeking support from the assembled crowd, but found only a wall of disapproving faces. His friends, who had been so enthusiastic in encouraging his antics earlier, now stood with their backs literally against the palace walls, their eyes fixed firmly on their shoes, their phones conspicuously dark and silent. The ones who had been filming moments ago suddenly seemed fascinated by the sky, the cobblestones, anything but their friend's predicament. As the first officer stepped forward, the metallic click of handcuffs being readied cut through the tense atmosphere like a knife. The crowd's reaction was immediate. A wave of murmurs, a few scattered bursts of approval, and even some soft applause from those who had been most offended by Dave's display of disrespect. "This is mad," Dave protested, his voice rising to a near shout as the officers efficiently secured his wrists behind his back. "It was just a joke. You can't actually arrest someone for this. I know my rights." But his protests were lost in the growing buzz of the crowd, his words drowned out by the collective voice of dozens of tourists and onlookers discussing what they'd just witnessed. The security officers began escorting him away with professional efficiency, their movements smooth and practiced, suggesting this wasn't the first time they'd had to deal with similar situations. As Dave was led through the parting crowd, a chorus of whispered comments and observations filled the air like autumn leaves in a breeze. The plaza had become a theatre, and every spectator had something to say about the drama they'd just witnessed. "That's what happens when you mistake tradition for entertainment," observed an elderly woman with a crisp British accent, nodding with satisfaction. "He thought he was above the rules," added a middle-aged tourist in an American accent, shaking his head. "Serves him right. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way." A young boy of perhaps 7 or 8 tugged insistently at his father's sleeve, his face scrunched up in confusion and curiosity. "Daddy, why did they take that man away? He was just playing, wasn't he?" The father, a distinguished-looking man in his 40s, knelt down beside his son, taking the opportunity to turn the incident into a teaching moment. His voice was gentle but firm as he explained, "Because respect isn't optional, Thomas. That guard isn't standing there as a tourist attraction or a photo opportunity. He's carrying on a tradition that's older than you, me, or even this plaza. He's protecting something important. Not just the palace, but the values and history it represents. And no one, no matter who they think they are, has the right to treat that with disrespect." The child's eyes widened with understanding, and he nodded solemnly, turning to look at the guard with newfound reverence. "Is that why he didn't get angry or shout, even when the man was being mean?" "Exactly," his father replied, smiling at his son's perception. "That's what real strength looks like." Nearby, a group of tourists from various countries had formed an impromptu discussion circle, exchanging quiet words of admiration in a mixture of accents and languages. "Did you see how he handled it?" said a woman in a flowered dress, her Australian accent filled with awe. "Not a word, not a gesture out of place, just that one step, and everyone knew exactly what it meant." "That's true power," agreed an elderly man who looked like a retired military officer, his bearing suggesting personal familiarity with discipline and protocol. He didn't need to shout or threaten. His dignity did all the talking necessary. "I've never seen anything like it," added another woman, adjusting her camera strap thoughtfully. "That's what it means to serve with honour, standing your ground without losing your composure, even when someone tries to provoke you. It's beautiful in a way." The energy in the plaza had transformed completely. What had begun as an act of thoughtless disrespect had metamorphosed into something entirely different. A powerful lesson about dignity, discipline, and the quiet strength of tradition. The incident had stripped away the tourist attraction veneer from the guard's role, revealing the deep well of respect and authority that lay beneath the ceremonial surface. The air itself seemed different now, charged with a new understanding of the ancient traditions being upheld on these cobblestones. What many had previously seen as a mere photo opportunity had been revealed as something far more meaningful, a living symbol of dignity and duty that commanded genuine respect. Tourists who had witnessed the confrontation began to disperse, their conversations filled with admiration and reflection. The Royal Guard, standing once again in his stoic stance, became the embodiment of dignity and discipline, a figure who had transformed a moment of disrespect into a powerful lesson. The incident left a mark on everyone who saw it. Groups of tourists lingered near the edges of the plaza, sharing hushed conversations. "I didn't realize they could actually respond," one man said, his voice tinged with awe. "I thought they just stood there, no matter what." "It wasn't just that he responded," his partner replied, glancing at the guard. "It was how he did it. Calm, controlled. He showed real strength without ever raising his voice." Parents knelt to explain the importance of the guard's actions to their children, while others stood in quiet reflection. A middle-aged woman with a camera remarked, "I've been here before, but I've never seen anything like that. It wasn't just his discipline, it was his honour." Nearby, a veteran stood slightly apart from the crowd, his gaze fixed on the guard. His weathered features reflected a mixture of admiration and nostalgia. He had seen courage in many forms, but today he was reminded that strength often lies in silence and patience. "That's what honor looks like," the veteran murmured to himself, tipping his head slightly in silent respect. Despite the stain on his tunic and the weight of the event, the guard's focus never wavered. He adjusted his posture, standing tall and resolute, his expression unreadable. To an outsider, it was as if nothing had happened. But for those who had been there, the guard was no longer just a ceremonial figure. He had shown them the meaning of resilience, dignity, and the power of controlled strength. The crowd's energy shifted. Where moments earlier there had been tension and provocation, now there was reverence. Phones were raised, not to mock, but to capture the guard's composed return to duty. He had become more than an icon. He was a symbol of steadfastness in a world often quick to react. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, its golden glow casting long shadows across the plaza, the Royal Guard stood firm, a silent sentinel in the face of a world that had momentarily tested his resolve. For those who witnessed the incident, it was more than a spectacle. It was a reminder that true strength doesn't lie in words or retaliation, but in the ability to remain composed under pressure. The Guard had shown that respect isn't demanded. It's earned through honor, discipline, and unwavering commitment. The lesson lingered long after the tourists began to leave, etched in their memories like the gilded gates of the palace itself. What do you think about the Royal Guard's actions? Have you ever witnessed someone respond to disrespect with such quiet strength and composure? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales of resilience, discipline, and honor. Until next time, remember, true strength lies in standing tall, letting your actions speak louder than words.